Okay, so again, there's a difference when my negative is inside and my negative is outside. So if we take a look at number 5 on our homework. Uh-oh. Yelling at me. When I take a look at number 5 here on my homework, notice the difference between number 5, it says negative x squared, and up here 3 it just says x squared. So for number 5, this negative is outside of my x squared. So when I go to do problem A, it says g of 9. So what that means is I'm going to take 9, this is my x value, and I'm going to put it in for every x value that I see. Now when I do that, notice the negative is outside of x. So I have negative, and then instead of x, I'm going to put 9. Every time. Let's try that again. Wait. So again, I have a negative, and instead of x, I put parentheses 9 squared plus 10. Instead of x, I'm going to put parentheses 9 minus 3.
We always put parentheses.
It's usually best to put parentheses.
Even when we type it in the calculator.
Yeah, it won't hurt to do so. Because what we have here is it's 10 times 9. So if you don't put parentheses, you want to put the multiplication symbol. But it's helpful when you do the squares. The time in which it might not make as much of a difference is if we had, like, say it was g of x equals 2 plus x. You don't really need parentheses when you put 9 in there. It would just be 2 plus 9. But if you put parentheses around there, we have adding, so we know we're adding, not multiplying. So it's okay if you put the parentheses. Okay. Now take a look at the difference between that one and letter B.
What? It's not working. Now.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay, so for letter B, it says g of negative 1. So negative 1 is what I'm putting in for x. So g, instead of x, negative 1. And this is negative. Instead of x, we put parentheses, right? So we have parentheses squared. And so my x is negative 1. So I have a negative 1 inside of here. Okay. And then I have plus 10 times, instead of x, I'm putting parentheses. And my parentheses is negative 1. And minus 3. So again, use your calculator to help you out. When you type this into your calculator, we would have a negative outside of my parentheses and a negative inside my parentheses. Then same thing with letter C. Negative 3 is our x value there, so we can see we have negative, and then instead of x, parentheses, negative 3 squared, plus 10 times parentheses, negative 3, and minus 2. Alright, so make sure you heavily use your calculator to help you out, and just a reminder, when we have that negative outside, make sure it's outside. If you have both inside and outside, like negative, like that last one you said, negative, negative 3 inside, just make sure you use negative outside and negative inside. Eric, what was your question?
Can you go back to the...
Yes.
How would you do the B?
The B1?
With the absolute value?
Oh, with the absolute value, sorry. So, same thing. H of 1. So 1 is my x value. That's what I'm going to put in for x. So it would be absolute value of 1 minus 7 times 1. Do you remember the absolute values on your calculator? Do you actually remember where it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Math.
Match what?
And then math.
Good.
And
Why?
the right button. What's up?
That was good.
So do you solve it in with the multiplication first, or do you have to write out everything after the x?
So you have a couple of options. You can can simplify this first and then put it in your calculator. So like if I were to simplify this, I'd have 1 minus 7 times 1 is 7. And 1 minus 7 is negative 6. So you can use your calculator to do the inside stuff and then do this, or you can just put this in your calculator. Just make sure you write out what it is that you're putting in your calculator so I can see that you're doing that on your calculator. So you can use your calculator any part of the way. Use calculator, simplify the inside first, or go and do the absolute value with it inside. Do we have other questions on this before we take your mini quiz? Okay. Go ahead and clear off your desks. We will transition to our mini quiz. Oh, awesome. All right, so taking a look at our assignment sheet, you can see this was definitely a shorter unit, even with the PSAT date in there. So this was a shorter unit for sure. And so today is our last new topic, which is X and Y intercepts. And so your homework tonight is the review packet, and next class we have our test over this. So, yep, short unit. We've got our test next class, so just keep that in mind as you're studying over the weekend. When do I see you? Tuesday? So Tuesday will be your test. So today we'll go over X and Y intercepts and zeros. And you'll have your review for homework. Just a reminder, the answer key for the review is on Blackboard, so just check your answers there. And then come see me the questions before next class. Next class we'll have our test. But we also will have our Unit 3 notebook due next class. So between now and next class, make sure you go ahead and find your papers and get them in order. And the next class, I'll have you staple them and turn them in. But just a heads up with that. Okay, so today we have X and Y intercepts. Let me pull up our smartboard. There's this one. Okay, let me grab the papers for you, and then we'll get started. Okay, I take it back. Gabby's going to pass them out while I take attendance. Okay, so like I said, today we're doing X and Y intercepts, and we're also going to talk about zeros. And zeros actually is the same thing as X intercepts. Okay, so our X intercept, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit on this guy. Our x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. Where the graph crosses the x-axis. Alright, so we're just going to look on our graph and see where it crosses. Remember, this is our x-axis going back and forth, left to right. So where our graph crosses it, we see it's right here. It's this point. We call that point our x-intercept. Now for this particular graph, what is my x value there? -4. Good. -4. So for this particular example, our x-intercept is -4, 0. Now, in general, the ordered pair is going to be whatever our x value is, but my y value is always going to be 0. Because if it's where it crosses the x-axis, on our x-axis, y equals 0. All the way along here, y is 0. We haven't gone up or down. Okay. So we're going to identify our x-intercept starting off from our graph. Just going to take a look at examples 1 and 2.
Wait. Can you please get that? Thank you.
Okay, so examples 1 and 2 says find where the graph touches the x-axis. Again, sometimes I might just ask you find the x-intercept. So I'm going to look and see where does it intersect this x-axis. I see it crosses right here. And then we're just going to list your point. What's my x value there? 2, and then y is 0. take a look at example 2. Again, where it crosses our x-axis, that happens right here. What's that? Negative 4 is here. Okay. Okay, so what's important to you remember, it's where it crosses the x-axis, and that's when our y value is 0. Because sometimes they'll ask us to do this from a table, and so you don't have your graph here. So it says find the ordered pair that has a 0 for y. If it has a 0 for y, that's another way of saying my y value is 0, so this is going to be an x-intercept. Okay, so this is just another way to say x-intercept. So they told you already how to do it. They said look for where y is 0. They might, again, just ask you, okay, find the x-intercept. All we have to do is look for where y is 0. Look at my table. Boom, 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 boom. There's my x-intercept. Point -2, 0. And for example 2, which one's my x-intercept? Good. We should have a number for x. My y value has to be 0 if it's between x-intercept. Because again, if it's on x-intercept, that means it's on my x-axis. We don't have up or down at all for y. Okay, so we've had it from, we've had it from a graph, we've had it from a table. Now it's time for an equation. Okay, so from an equation, we know y has to be 0. Right? For each of these, y is 0. So all we do is put in 0 for y. So I have negative 9x plus 2, instead of y, I'm going to put in 0, equals, there's my 6. So
are we supposed to solve it?
and now we just solve for x. What is anything times 0?
Wait, why would it equal 0?
Y is 0. For x-intercepts, y is always going to be 0.
So if you do 2 times 0, it's going to be 0.
Yeah, so anything times 0 is 0. So I'm just going to draw a line for this. That is just 0. So what I really have is negative 9x equals 36.
You have to divide by 9.
And then divide by negative 9. Go and use your calculator to help you out. What do we get for that? Negative 4. Okay. So when we write this out, we're going to write it as an ordered pair. Negative 4 is my x value. What was my y value?
0.
0. Good. Okay, so same thing for the next one.
Okay, so what would you, it'd be -4 here?
Our y value is always 0.
Would every equation tell us to put 0 for y?
It's not going to tell you that. It's going to say just find your x-intercept, and you have to remember that means y equals 0. All right. So again, to find our x-intercept here, we have to put in 0 for y. So I have 0 equals 6x minus 24. And then we just solve for x. What is my first step going to be? Add my 24 to both sides. So I get 24 equals 6x. And then I heard someone say, what do we do next? Divide. Go and
You
divide
get
by
4.
6. Did we get 4 yet? Oh, this time it's a positive. Good. Okay, I accidentally did my work on the blank. So my x-intercept, I'm going to write down here. 0.4. What's my y value? 0. All right, for my last one here. Again, your x-intercept, put in 0 for y. Do I have a y? No. Guess what your answer is? 3. Y is still 0. Does anyone know what type of line this is? This is actually a line. Very good, vertical. It's a vertical line. That's something we'll talk about, I think, next unit or the unit after. Lux and Hoy.
Wait, so if x equals 3, that just means that's it.
Yeah, put it in the ordered pair. What this represents, Eric, is this is a graph. Vertical line of 3. And so my x-intercept is this dot right here, which is 3. Okay. Questions with that? So that's x-intercept. Let me see if I want to go backside or forward. Okay, let's go to the right side of our paper now. So those are x-intercepts.
Now we're going to find
Yes. So again, x-intercepts, we have an x value, but y is 0. Now for y-intercepts, similar idea. We have y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So again, on my y-axis now is this guy. Okay. So I look at where my graph crosses that, and in this particular example, what is that ordered pair? 0, 2. Yeah, so you gotta be careful. My x, I didn't go anywhere left or right.
Oh,
Right?
Yeah.
So this point is the point 0, and then that's positive 2. So for this example, my y-intercept is 0, 2. But in general, my y-intercept, we have a y value, but my x value is always going to be 0. Because again, it's crossing my y-axis, which means I didn't go left or right. What are you confused with? This one right here? So it's where it crosses the y-axis. Are you okay with this being my y-axis? Okay. See my graph? See my y-axis? Where do they both hit? Right there. Does that make sense? The intersection's right there. So now we have to ask, what is that ordered pair? So how do we know what that ordered pair is? How do I know the ordered pair? What do I have to do? I don't know if I'm just-
No, you have to, you still have 0.
Yeah, we just have to count it on the graph, right?
Yeah.
To write out that ordered pair, I just have to count it on the graph. So I'm just counting 0. I didn't go, for x, I didn't go left or right at all.
No, you just went
So I was 0. And then how much did I go up? 1 side. That's my y-intercept.
Okay.
So it's just where it crosses our y-axis, and then we just have to write down what that point is.
But you would always, you still give x value for the line.
Yeah, it's just your x value, so it's 0. Right? Because again, I didn't go left or right at all.
And they have to cross the
It
y-axis.
has to cross y-axis. So let's go ahead and do a couple more of the graphs. Again, it's where it crosses my y-axis. This is my y-axis.
0.
It's this point right here.
0.
0, -6. We didn't go left or right, so we went 0, and then we went down 6, so -6. And example 2 over here. 0, 8. It's this point right here. I didn't go left or right at all, so it's still 0. +8. Questions with those? Yeah, for our y-intercept, x is 0. So we have a y value, that x is going to be 0. Okay, so looking at our table, when they ask us to find our y-intercept from the table,
Look at where the zeros on it.
good. I already know my x value has to be 0. So if you want to just go and fill that in, you already know that even without looking at the table. I have a y value, but my x is 0. We've got nothing for x. So now we have to find that on our table. Here you go. So I have a y value, but x is nothing. It's 0.
You already.
Do we have questions on example 1 or 2 for students? Okay. So now with an equation, again, to find our y-intercept, I know that my x value is going to be 0. I have a y, so my x value is 0. So I'm just going to fill that in just to remind myself. X is 0. I have y, so I want to keep y. I want the y-intercept. I'm keeping my y. I don't want to get rid of that y. But x is 0.
Just divide by 2.
So if I put in 0 here, what's negative 9 times 0? 0. So again, I'm just going to slash that out. Alright, and then Eric, what did you say we need to do?
You divide by 2, and 36 divided by 2 is 18. Your ordered pair is 0 and 18.
Very good. Divide by 2 on both sides, so we get 18. 0, 18. I'm going to rewrite that because it doesn't look very much like 18. Alright. Over here, again, I want to find y, so I'm going to leave y alone. The x is just 0, so I have y. Let me do it.
It'd be y equals 0, right, basically.
Y equals 6 times 0 minus 24. But what is 6 times 0?
0.
So what does y equal?
Negative 24.
Negative 24, that's all we've got left. 0 minus 24 is negative 24. Alright, and then our last one. Ooh, tricky, tricky, tricky. This is a sneaky one here. Do we have a y?
No. 0.
So if I try to put in 0 for x, watch what happens. Does 0 ever equal 3?
No.
No, so guess what? We just don't have a y-intercept here. We're just gonna write none. There's no y value to solve for. 0 never equals 3. Let me show you what's happening with this. It doesn't ever cross our y-axis. Yeah, so if I were to graph this, this is my graph. Does this red line ever cross my y-axis? No, so that's why we don't have them. Sneaky, sneaky. Okay, flip it over to the back side.
Just more, just something else.
This is your phone. No, my phone's turned off. Okay. So now let's take a look at the back side. So just remember, when I have an x value, but y is 0, that is my x-intercept.
So that means that that's your y.
This next one, I have a y value. This is my y-intercept. So I have a y value. This is my y-intercept. Just a reminder. Okay. Now this next part says zeros. When we're talking about zeros, we have multiple names for this. Ooh. Sorry, my computer's.
X, Y, Z, R, S.
So for our zeros, it says think about your X, Y, Z zeros. That's a stretch. Okay, so what a zero is just another name. Zeros, roots, and solutions are all names for the x-intercept. So when I say x-intercept and I say 0, I'm talking about the same thing. If I say x-intercept and I say root, I'm talking about the same thing. If I say x-intercept, say solution, I'm talking about the same thing. So x-intercepts, zeros, roots, and solutions. These all mean the same thing. Do you remember what that's called when we have words that mean the same thing?
Synonym.
Synonym. Good. Not cinnamon. That's what I put in my son's oatmeal this morning. But synonym. Good. So synonyms. You guys ever watch Finding Nemo when he's like, anemone? Did you guys ever watch Finding Nemo? Yes. Were you alive when that was made? Or was that before you were born? You were alive? Okay. It was a good movie. Anyway, so synonyms They're just different words that mean the same thing. Andrew, not appropriate. Don't ever do that. So zeros, roots, and solutions, x-intercept, they all mean the same thing. So when they ask you about your zeros, you want to think about your x-intercepts. Right? Because that's just the same thing. X-intercepts and zeros are the same thing. Now, an x-intercept is, what does y equal for all of my x-intercepts?
0.
Yeah, y equals 0 for all of my x-intercepts. So you can think of it that way. When does y equal 0?
When we're looking for the pockets and
Good. And we have zeros, roots, and solutions. So these all mean the same thing. X-intercepts, zeros, roots, solutions. That's when our y equals 0 we get an x value. So when it says find the zeros, you can just think find my x-intercepts. Alright. So find the zeros of the graphs below. This is the same thing as saying find your x-intercepts. Remember, your x-intercept, we have the x value, but my y value is 0. Alright, so we're just looking for x-intercept, where it crosses my x-axis. Anthony's correct. We gotta write it as a point, though. It's the point 2,
2, 0.
2, 0.
So here we got 2 points. Number 2, example 2, we got 2 x points.
We do. We have 2 x-intercepts here. Good. So does Eric recognize we have an x-intercept right here
-2.
and an x-intercept here? We will have more than one x-intercept. In fact, this is something you'll learn in Algebra 2. You can have infinite x-intercepts. The graph y equals sine of x has infinite x-intercepts. So it's okay if there's more than one. You're just going to list every one that you see. So this first one here is -2, 0. And we also have, what's this point here?
+1, 0.
Good. Positive 1, 0. Good. Okay, before we take a look at the next side, do we have questions on zeros, which are just x-intercepts? Okay with this? I am not moving it yet. Okay, so x-intercepts are just zeros. You're just finding the point from your graph or from your table. But of course, now we have to talk about this in terms of our function notation, what we were working with for the last class. Alright. When we're talking about functions, we call them zeros. Remember, zeros are just the same thing as x-intercepts. Okay? But when we're talking about functions, we typically call them zeros, so it's just our x-intercepts. But we usually will write it in function notation for f of x. So here it says find the zeros of the equations below. Remember, zeros is the same thing as x-intercept. And that's when we have our x, but my y is 0. Okay. So in function notation, we're talking about f of x. And just a reminder that f of x is just simply my y value. So if for an x-intercept y is 0, that's the same thing as saying f of x is going to be 0. Right? Or say f of x is 0. So for 3 and 4, they want us to find the zeros. It just means find your x-intercept. So we want our x value. We put in 0 for y. But there's no y. What happened to our y? What represents y? F of x. This represents my y. So this is what I'm putting in 0 for. So I have 0 equals -x plus 7. So same thing as before. It's just now we put in 0 for f of x because there's no y. It's the same thing. All right, and let's solve for x. What do you guys want to do?
divide by.
We can divide by number, but let's do the 7
minus
first. Yeah, let's go and subtract your 7 first. So -7 equals -x. Now let's divide by negative. X equals 7. And again, we want to write this. Well, so sometimes we almost always write this as an ordered pair. When we're in our function notation, though, We're just solving for x, so you can actually just go ahead and put, because it says 0, we're just going to put x. So if you're not sure, you can go ahead and put the point. This is an x-intercept. We'll write it as a point. Zeros, we typically just write it x.
Oh, so there's different types of way you write it out?
Yeah, for an x-intercept, because we're talking about a point on the graph, we'll write it as a point. Anthony, put it away, please. And we're doing zeros with our function notation. Once you get x equals, you can use If you're not sure, though, just go ahead and additionally write it as. Alright, so for number 4, again, we want our we want our y value to be 0, but we don't have y, so we can put it in here. Fx is 0. That was negative 2/5 x plus 4. What do you guys want to do first for this one? Subtract the 4? Let's do it. Alright, so I have minus 4 on both sides. So I get negative 4 equals negative 2/5 x. Who remembers, how do I get rid of that fraction? What do I do? Good, I heard flip it. Who said that? Where'd that come from? Good. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which means we flip it. Good. So I have 5 over negative 2. Now I have to do this to both sides. You can use your calculators to help you out. What do we get over here?
How do you do that vertical? Never mind.
How did you get it? What did you do?
Out and y equals.
Good. Alpha y equals, let's do that vertical fraction. Alright, what do we get for 5 over negative 2 minus negative 8? Good. 10 is correct.
Negative.
Hopefully a positive 10. Did you forget a negative with one of those?
Oh, it was negative 4, right? Oh,
Yeah.
man.
This is 10. Good. Okay, so in summary, our x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. We write that as a point. We have an x value and y is 0. Our y-intercept is where it crosses. Here's my y-axis. Crosses our y-axis. We have a y value of x is 0. Okay? When they say zeros, roots, solutions, that all means x-intercept. Take 0, put it in for your y. Or in function notation, put it in for f of x, but it's just the same. Do you have questions with that? So we're just going to do a little more practice with this. Force practice.
Is that homework?
No.
And to do on home.
Okay, so taking a look at our classwork, let's just have you guys do, to start us off here, I want you going to do both using the graph. And I'll just do these ones. Alright, so just going to do those ones that I've circled. You are welcome to try individually or with your shoulder partner. But I want you to start off with just those ones I've circled. Yes. Aurelio. For your x-intercept, we have an x value between 0 for y. It's kind of like the opposite. Alright, so start off with these circled ones. I'll be coming around to help out as needed. We should not be on our phones, Gabby. So start off on these. You can ask those around you for help, work with your shoulder partner, and I'll be coming around to help out as well. And then we'll go over these ones and go from there.
You're gonna get homework?
Yes, you're going to get homework. But just a reminder, for x-intercept, we want to find our x value. We know our y is 0. For my y-intercept, I want to find my y. Oh, x is here. Homework is already packet.
Has to be a line point complex.
I'm going to go into the next calculator. So when you're doing your calculator, you can pick up your review. So return your calculator, pick up your homework. Remember, the key is up on Blackboard. So check Blackboard for the key so you can check your answers. Next door, you turn in your calculators. We have our test next class.